thank you so much for letting me take the time to talk today. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the amazing speakers so far. It's just phenomenal hearing the work that everybody's been doing. So my talk is talk about Skylanders Swap Force, and some of the big decisions that we made as a result of some of the UX playtesting that we did on the title. So just a brief intro about myself. I'm a UX research manager, currently looking for employment. I've been working in the games industry and the UX side for around about 17 years. Background is also in VR development from hardware and software. I've shipped about 35 titles in total over the years. These are just some of the little ones I put in, everything from Call of Duty, Skylanders, Tony Hawk, Shatter, Diablo Immortal, Spider-Man, Shatter Dimensions, just a few. So today's 10-minute talk, that's just me get out of the way. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some of the key UX findings that helped in the decision-making that changed sort of the direction of Skylanders Swap Force. And before we go on, I think it might be useful just to sort of give a brief example of what Skylanders is, just a brief idea. So Skylanders was this concept born by a company called Toys with Bob while I worked at Activision. And their idea was to bring toys to life for children. So this is where we had a physical toy, and I still have my Skylanders toys here, where you put them on a portal, and that toy then, the character that toy would get put into the game, and the player could then play as that toy, as that character. Everything that you do is stored on the toy, and then you could change it. You could put it into other people's games, take it over to a friend's house, and that kind of thing. So the idea was to bring that toy experience to life in a video game. So we ran UX research on Skylanders from a really early concept stage. And this is an example we had here. And I said, so we used Connect 4 discs with this small cutout of Skylander on the disc. And the RFID was taped under the Connect 4 itself. Also, sorry for the poor image. I'm going to hold my hand up and admit I'm not an artist. I'm a UXer, but I'm not an artist. But this is the kind of thing we had, learning how kids would interact with these toys, how they would play with them, what they would do, how they would put them on the portal, just to get an understanding and learning how things work. So this is where we started off from. So Swap Force is different. Okay, so Swap Force is third in the series. It's part of a series that sold, I think, over 175 million toys. The Swap Force game itself sold around about 6 million units. So that's Swap Force. So quick recap. But the thing is that with Swap Force was different to the Skylanders games in that this time it allowed the player to mix and match the toys to make a new character. So instead of just putting one character on, this time you'd have an upper portion and you'd also have a lower portion. So we end up with something like this. So these are some Skylander toys. So what you can do is in Swap Force here, you could then take the top off the characters and mix and match and put them together. So again, I have an example here. You could pull them apart and put them back together and create a sort of new character. So obviously allows you to mix and match these figures. The thing is, though, with Swap Force, initially, it wasn't always like this. So the original prototype characters had 3 levels the player could select from. So no longer it wasn't just the 2, it was 3 levels. You had the upper portion, which was the head. You had a middle portion, and then you also had the lower portion. So this sounds great, right? This sounds amazing from a kid's perspective. I have all this choice. I can create different characters. I can create different variations. So that, from a player's perspective, this must be great. As it happens, no, this wasn't ideal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain why now. So enter the playtest. So we ran an extensive playtest on the early concepts. And obviously this included the hardware because from a Skylanders perspective, the hardware is obviously the primary part of the experience. You have the toys. You want to make sure that experience is fun, for the children. And while we were playtesting, we uncovered 2 key issues. First one, with the 3 section, is complexity. So having 3 items to mix and match had a huge impact on the overall complexity of the experience. So from a kid's perspective, think of the children that we're play testing with from the age of 6, maybe some of the ages, 5 upwards. They added far too much choice to the experience. Because for them, they couldn't create something quickly. They couldn't have that experience of just grabbing a toy, putting on a portal. They would pick something up. Which one do I do? And that broke up the gameplay. It sort of it shattered the gameplay, and it sort of messed up that experience for them. And also, players couldn't accurately remember the character. And from a kid's perspective, this is huge because if you think about it, every character that a child interacts with, that they have, that they want to take with them, they remember what that character looks like. But if they have so much choice in creating a character, they can't, that actual character doesn't get remembered, and they can't take it with them in their sort of imagination as well as the game itself. So from a kid's perspective, just too many choices, far too many choices. The second problem, we're clumsy by nature, unfortunately. As humans, human beings, we are unfortunately clumsy, and we never outgrow this. And as weird as this sounds, this was actually the worst one from a kid's perspective. Let's look at it. So firstly, players would drop the pieces. So imagine having 3 pieces, players are trying to pick them up, trying to recreate them, and they're going to drop. And the first question here is, what shape is a head? Well, if we look at these here, head is round. And that means it's perfect for rolling off a desk, rolling off the couch, and going underneath places, where they unfortunately shouldn't be, which means it's gone, it's lost. Kids, during our play testing, even in the labs, well, in the lab we had at Activision, where we were running a play test, they would drop the pieces, they would roll under the desk, roll under the chair, and watching kids, they would spend most of the time trying to figure out how to put something back together instead of actually playing the game. So of course, from a kid's perspective, it broke the experience. So where's the fun in that? And I'm going to let you into a secret. There is no fun. There's no fun in that sort of experience. Because, like I say, they've spent far too much time scrambling under the chairs and desks trying to find that lost piece. And I can imagine what we found when we were playing Skylanders, when we did the play test early on in the original Skylanders, is that kids would bring the portal and put them on the couch next to them. So what this means, if you imagine that playing Swap Force, they're trying to create the character, these pieces are going to roll away, roll under the couch, roll in between the cushions, and just no fun. And I was saying, it's going to make for a really miserable experience. So the decision, this is where the decision made was to go with the 2-piece version that we see here. These mean for the 2-piece, it's easy to quickly grab and create. And if pieces fall out of the hands, they just land where they are. Because in this instance now, because we have the 2 pieces, there's nothing round. So this piece is just going to fall on the floor or fall onto the desk, and just they can pick it up quickly and quickly put it back together again. Now, people think, well, we're limiting the choice. We're removing that choice, moving that 3 pieces. Well, the thing is, though, the kids still felt powerful. They still had that flexibility for creating their own character, and they could still, delve into that experience of the game because they can create a character that they remember. It's much easier to create a character without only 2 pieces than it is with 3 pieces, and that really had an impact on the overall experience. They can also quickly create a character to match a specific situation in the game. So what we found was that as players were playing the game, if they were coming across a certain area where maybe there was not much combat involved, they would create a character that was maybe just somebody who just wants to walk around. But once they come across an area where there's significant combat expected, they would quickly switch out a character. And by being able to do that quickly, it makes them more reactive to the experience in the game. Create an experience that encouraged players to swap out and create new characters. So what we were noticing here was really interesting was by limiting the choice, by limiting that option to reduce the number of characters they could actually create, they actually swapped out and created more characters. So they wanted to experiment. They felt empowered and encouraged to be able to do that themselves. In this instance, less choice actually meant more playtime and more creativity from a player's perspective, which is obviously from us creating the games, that's what we want to see. We want to see players enjoying and having fun. So let's bring this to a close. From a user perspective, what you have to remember is that more choice doesn't automatically mean it's going to be good or better. Sometimes it's better to reduce this choice, reduce the decision-making requirements, and creating a sort of much more valid and impactful experience. If we had gone down the road with the 3 pieces, we may have had it may look good on paper, but in reality, it's not much fun. So playtest early. Obviously, as UXers, your playtesting is our sort of bread and butter. But find those problems and deal with them when they're really early to handle and really easy to sort of potentially address. Because when we were creating the playtesting with Swap Force, we were doing with just simple 3D printed designs. So obviously here it was nice and easy to sort of, we can make some modifications and that kind of thing. So by playtesting early, we find these problems early and involve as many different teams as possible. This is a key thing here. We worked with the amazing people for Swap. We're working with Skylanders, obviously working with Toys for Bob people. For Swap Force, Skylanders Swap Force, it was Vicarious Visions, and everybody there is absolutely phenomenal. But reach out to teams. I think somebody mentioned earlier on, you ask questions, as many questions as possible. Go for it. As UXers, this is really, really a key thing. Because it's so important for us to be involved in the whole experience. Because if we'd have just done the playtesting on the game itself, we may not have uncovered this problem. But working with the teams, asking questions, working with designers, producers, audio design, everything. Working with we actually even also worked with the toy designers themselves to actually just do playtesting on the actual toys. So we wanted to, for example, one of the things we would do is we had this big whiteboard. And we had these sort of small magnetic characters that the players could then put together on the board themselves. And we wanted to explore this. What kind of character would a player create when they're coming across a small number of enemies? Or what kind of character would they create if they come across a large number of enemies? Involving these different teams, and really delving into that experience of the player to sort of identify those key issues that create that emotional impact. I think previously a previous talk mentioned that emotional impact that the game has. That's what we were aiming to do. By having players understand and and identify with these characters, we wanted to sort of really delve into that experience and really drive that creativity from a child's perspective, because a child's imagination is one of the most wonderful things that anybody of us can ever experience. So watching them learn, play, and love these moments was truly wonderful. And also think outside the box. When it comes to doing playtesting, don't just if you just don't just like get a build and do playtesting. Think outside. What can you do at an early stage? One of the things I used to do, I think somebody mentioned that he worked at Pickpock. I used to work at before Pickpock was Pickpock. I was at She, which was that's when they were, and we would run playtesting, mixing things up with paper. Paper prototyping with the actual build itself. So if the UI wasn't developed, if there's nothing there at the time, we would have pieces of paper in front of the players ready for them to pick up at a certain time. So we would say, hey, pick up paper number one. This is what you would see on the screen. Letting players, us as researchers, think outside the box to really delve into that experience and to really learn what makes a player really want to experience your experience. And this is what we did with Swap Force, is to really learn how players interact with these toys, what makes that toy truly special for them. And in this instance, reducing the number of options from 3 to 2 created a more valid and impactful experience from a kid's perspective. So thank you. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you just want to chat. Happy to just drop me an email or feel free to look me up on LinkedIn.